to my one-woman show. It's nice to meet ya. Will we meet again? I'll never know. You can smell my leather from my head to my toes. Smile for the camera. I'll see you on my video.
It is episode 142 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Here's our headline. This is not a shocker. The Hunter Biden pardon Fox News freakout.
Fox News alert. You saw this, I'm sure. President Biden has pardoned his son Hunter of any offenses from the past decade, despite Joe Biden's many promises to the American public.
First Lady Jill Biden breaking her silence, saying that she supports what some are calling the most sweeping pardon since Richard Nixon.
Most of the pardons that we hear about are pardons where someone has served their time, they paid their debt to society, and they're going to end up, getting it removed.
Maybe my mom wouldn't pardon me, but I'm sure my father would. But that's the point, is that everybody knew he was going to pardon his son.
So my question is, who is he going to pardon on January 20th? Is he going to pardon his brother? Is he going to pardon himself?
James,
this pardon is so extraordinary because of the length, but also because it was a prospective pardon. It pardoned Hunter all the way to midnight.
I'll say this, though. You accurately pointed out the duration and the span of this pardon is not normal. Going all the way back to 2014 for crimes that he was not even yet convicted of.
Joe Biden's pardon of Hunter Biden proves President Trump's signature campaign promise to end the weaponization of our justice system.
And I just think about all those people that went to bat for the paragon of justice and ethics and saying how great Joe Biden was for not pardoning his son.
Right.
So then when he says, okay, I'm going to pardon, if I were KJP and I were in the room, I would say, respectfully, sir, I can't go out there and say, well, we're blaming it now on politics and blah, blah, blah.
So this fear that they have, they're kind of telling on themselves. I mean, to retroactively pardon him years later and then to do it right before Burisma, I mean...
In 2014. Right. Yeah. But it's not just retroactive.
But it's a sweeping pardon that we haven't seen really the likes of since Nixon. He could be called to testify. Last time he did that, the House accused him of being misleading, even false in his testimony. If he commits perjury again, it's a new crime. And this pardon will not have an impact, and he could face additional charges.
So normally when I put a montage together like that, that was about a minute and a half. I might have to go through the whole week to find examples. This one was so ridiculously easy. I just went, I know this is going to be cake. So let's just go Fox and Friends Monday, The 5 Monday, Jesse Watters Primetime Monday, and see what comes up when we search for the word pardon. I have to do each show separately, but it was crazy. And then I thought, okay, so to make this the most interesting, I'm going to try to get different voices for this. But that was also incredibly easy. Because this is all they talked about last week. I was losing my mind. It was like this, the Daniel Penny trial, which actually didn't resolve until this week, so we'll discuss it in next week's podcast. The CEO murder got a little bit of a mention. And then it was just this, and then like Trump's amazing, Trump's cabinet picks, and this. It was just... What are we doing? What are we doing? Slowly losing my mind over this one. I personally hate the Hunter Biden scandal, and Fox had pretty much abandoned it once the impeachment inquiry that was started mostly by Representative James Comer fizzled out. They just dropped it, and we were talking about other things, and I thought, oh, we're finally past this, and then now we're back in the zone. And I am like, why? Anyway, okay, so last week on Fox, the outrage machine was on overdrive as the overpaid stuffed shirts expressed their disgust at President Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter. Judge Jeanine conveniently forgot to mention that Trump pardoned her ex-husband. Steve Doocy and Emily Compagno both declared that the president-elect was already improving the economy, and Jesse Watters joked about annexing Canada and Greenland while promoting conspiracy theories about Iran rigging the 2020 election, and we'll get to that later. Jessica Tarlov was the only person on the network that mentioned Donald J. Trump also pardoned a family member. Hunter Biden had fallen off the radar of Fox News, But last week, it was suddenly the most important topic in the world. And I mean in the world. Syrian civil war being, rousted up again, and Bashar al-Assad driven out of the country. That was a minor story last week on Fox. It was a blip. Barely mentioned it. I'm not kidding. That was a nothing. That was a nothing burger on Fox last week. Hunter Biden pardon was the biggest story. This is all they talked about. Okay. Just absolutely nutty. Anyone watching Fox News exclusively last week might not know that the U.S. government is testing raw milk for bird flu. Opposition forces have protested against a Kremlin-backed government in the country of Georgia, which is also not a big story on Fox, or that the Department of Justice found that the Memphis police have committed human rights violations and used excessive force, especially towards black residents. These were all stories that were mentioned on PBS, but not on Fox. So yes, and the shows that I covered last week were Fox and Friends, The Five, and Jesse Watters Primetime. But I picked up extra hours of Fox and Friends on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday to get various things. One of which will be the next podcast, which I wanted to do last week, but I got a little bit too much into the weeds, going down too many rabbit holes for Pete Hegseth. But that's coming. I'm literally going to start working on it as soon as I proof this and publish it. It was also a moving target. That story just won't die. So I'm like, there was more and more and more and more about him. I also got trolled by a bunch of right-wingers, which was hilarious because I was just leaned right into the skid and was joking with them because they just kept elevating my stuff. I had 6 videos. They had done okay. One of them went crazy viral because everybody on the right wing was like angry that I even dared clip it, which was Pete Hegseth openly drinking while producing a show for Fox Nation. And I just thought it was funny because they kept saying, these unnamed sources, you're using these unnamed sources, how dare you? And I'm like, well, here's a clip of him drinking whiskey on Fox Nation while he's working. It just seems like kind of an excuse to drink whiskey. How dare you clip that is basically what happened. And I was like, well, thank you. Now it's up to 2 million views on Twitter. You really showed me, didn't you? Hopefully a senator saw it. Okay. So this next clip refers back to the Hunter Biden pardon. And I use a clip that Aaron Rupar also generated from Fox Business. Shout out to Aaron Rupar there. So here we go. This is Lawrence Jones. Trump won't go after Hunter Biden. So this is from Tuesday. This is one of many segments. I was just like, they were just like coming up with reasons to talk about this. They're like, the weather today is cold and Hunter Biden got a pardon. Let's talk about that again, shall we? And I'm like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this again? I hate this topic. Please stop. Just stop. Okay. Anyway, here's the clip.
I honestly think their superstition that Trump they just got it all wrong. There was no plan to go after the Bidens. He's the type of person, just like a UFC fight, once he's beaten you, he's done. He's done. The fight is over, and he's moves on.
So this next clip was captured by Aaron Rupar. It is Elizabeth McDonald. She's a correspondent from Fox Business, and she's speaking to Representative Nicole Maliotakis. She's a representative from New York about the pardon. And this is sort of, now they don't say Trump, but Congress is a thing and has power. Here you go.
Our investigation must continue, I believe, to let the American people know the truth, even if these pardons are taking place.
Congressman, everything you said is really important. The American people, because the media didn't cover, then watchdogs have been criticizing them for not covering what you've been talking about for a long time. And the other thing, too, is the wording of the U.S. Constitution shows it's unconstitutional to do preemptive pardons. So show the wording of the Constitution. It doesn't see anything. It says pardons for offenses, not future offenses or potential offenses down the road. That means Biden's blanket pardon of Hunter Biden can be challenged and thrown out in court.
I agree, and I think it should be. And I think that you'll see members from the Oversight Committee and other committees that have worked so diligently on this try to seek out those arguments.
So that is a sitting member of Congress openly saying that she wants to continue the investigations into Hunter Biden, the completely useless investigations into Hunter Biden. Now, federal authorities have been investigating Hunter Biden since 2018, before Joe Biden started his campaign for the presidency in 2000. 2020. After Republicans gained control of the House, representatives in 3 different committees also began investigations into Hunter Biden's various business dealings. Representative James Comer of Kentucky, along with Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio and Representative Jason Smith of Missouri, all Republicans, spearheaded an impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden in September 2023. House Oversight Committee Chair Representative James Comey, he was the main person behind this, accused Hunter Biden and his father of a slew of fantastical crimes, such as taking bribes for government favors and selling access to hostile foreign governments. After 8 months of an exhaustive investigation that included dozens of hearings, witness testimony, subpoenaed bank records, copies of personal checks, whistleblower testimony, and giant images of nude photos of Hunter Biden obtained from his abandoned laptop, Comer, Jordan, and Smith couldn't find much of anything. Comer's failed impeachment inquiry ended with a whimper. His key witness, Alexander Smirnov, a former informant, was criminally indicted for making false claims to the FBI. And according to the charging documents filed against him, Smirnov knowingly lied when he said that both President Biden and his son accepted $5 million in bribes from the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. The gun charges Hunter Biden was convicted of were hardly a secret. Investigators figured out he had purchased a gun while using drugs after he openly admitted to doing so in his published memoir, Beautiful Things. He didn't actually write, "I lied on a gun" form, but it would have been fairly obvious to anyone reading his book that he was still heavily using crack cocaine when he purchased a firearm. In terms of the tax charges he faced, he paid the IRS back taxes and penalties for 2 years and pleaded guilty to 9 felony charges related to tax evasion. So not really that, I mean, like the tax crimes we knew about, the gun crime was kind of petty because they got that from his memoir, and absolutely no one's charged for that as a standalone crime. It's usually combined with something else. So you'd think after that many years and that much time and effort focused on trying to find dirt and find a crime that they could stick to Hunter Biden and his father, they would have come up with something, but they didn't, which is kind of shocking considering the man was flying high on crack cocaine for years. But he had enough sense within him to, I don't know, not commit some sort of bribery with his father. They didn't do that. They may, you know, Hunter Biden, not exactly my favorite person on the planet. I've read his memoir and just went, oh, okay, you are an addict. And I think you still probably need some therapy. I didn't like him more, which is shocking. You would think you would, considering he worked with editors and a book publisher that tried to make him look as good as possible. And I just went, I mean, I felt bad for him because he's suffering from addiction, but I didn't like him. I openly admit this. I loved his ex-wife. I just thought, well, I could have coffee with this woman. But I just, you know, it just was one of the, because I also read her memoir. So very flawed individual, but we have people like this in our family. But again, they didn't find any evidence of an actual crime other than smoking crack on camera and having sex with consensual professional sex workers. That's it. And those are kind of mild crimes, especially the sex worker one. So moving on, Jessica Tarlov was the only person to bring up how Trump also pardoned a family member. And this was from Monday, the 5, while discussing the Hunter Biden pardon, which again was the major thing last week. And Trump has since said he's going to appoint Charles Kushner as the ambassador to France, which has got to be a pretty cushy job, but all things considered. But here we go.
Has more backbone than they're used to seeing from Joe Biden. He should have always said maybe, though, about this. It was, you know, and I said, you guys asked me, well, do you believe him? And I said, I have no reason not to believe him, but you would think that any parent would be thinking in the back of their mind, I don't want my kid to go to jail. And if it's true what Karine Jean-Pierre said about the timing of this, I'm sure that this weekend the news rolled in that Charles Kushner is going to be the ambassador to France, a very cushy job, someone who was pardoned for what Chris Christie, who prosecuted him, called one of the most loathsome and disgusting crimes. I mean, the guy videotaped.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but the juxtaposition
well, he
of
served
that,
time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he served
did.
time.
Okay.
Kushner did. He paid his debt to society. That's the end of it.
And the
So notice how they just cut her off before she could get to any of the good stuff. So here we go. This is what he did. Charles Kushner's crimes. On August 18th, 2005, Kushner pleaded guilty to 16 counts of assisting in the filing of false tax returns, 1 count of retaliating against a cooperating witness, and 1 count of making false statements to the FEC. Kushner admitted that as chairman of Kushner Companies, he assisted in filing false tax returns claiming over $1 million in partnership charitable contributions as office expenses, causing losses to the IRS of between $200,000 and $325,000. After he discovered that his brother-in-law was assisting in the investigation against him, he devised a plan to retaliate against him. Kushner personally recruited a sex worker to seduce his sister's husband and have sex with him on camera. Kushner also admitted that he paid a private investigator $25,000 to help coordinate the seduction. He then showed a copy of the sex act with his sister. Kushner also admitted to making false statements to the Federal Election Commission, which allocated campaign contributions to certain individuals who had no knowledge that the contributions were being made in their names and had not consented to him making the contributions. Charles Kushner was sentenced to 24 months in prison for his pleas of guilty to assisting in the filing of false tax returns, retaliating against a cooperating witness, and making false statements to the Federal Election Commission. His case was prosecuted by then U.S. Attorney Chris Christie in Newark, New Jersey. U.S. District Judge Jose L. Lianes called Kushner's crime disgraceful and reprehensible, then sentenced him to the top of the eligible range, 18 to 24 months. Under the plea agreement with the government, Kushner was also fined $40,000, the maximum amount as determined under U.S. sentencing guidelines. Kushner also agreed to pay $508,900 to the FEC for violating contribution regulations. So yes, imagine holidays at the Kushner family gatherings after that. You paid someone to seduce your brother-in-law, and then you filmed it without his knowledge, and you showed it to your sister because you were mad that they could helped the government convict you of tax evasion and an FEC violation. Wow! And this is an incredibly wealthy man. Incredibly wealthy man. I pay thousands of dollars in taxes because I'm self-employed and I don't have paychecks, so I have to pay what my employer would pay plus what I would pay in payroll taxes. So it's a lot. Ask any self-employed person. We pay a lot of money in taxes. And as a real estate developer, he would pay a lot of money in taxes. But guess what? He's also making a lot of money. So suck it up. You just didn't want to pay taxes. And he was making these campaign contributions without people's knowledges in their names, which is super shady. And he got busted. And then he basically destroys his sister's marriage or greatly damages it. I don't know if they're still married. But like, you've severed, you've destroyed and wounded a close family member's relationship to you for life. For life. Oh my goodness. And for what? You're still rich. It's just disgusting. It's gross. Anyway. Now, speaking of family pardons, we move on to Judge Jeanine. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back and see what she said about pardons because I noticed a pattern here. So this is just from 2 days. This is from Monday and Wednesday. And you'll hear a pattern that she keeps saying when she talks about pardons. And this is, of course, from the 5.
Most of the pardons that we hear about are pardons where someone has served their time, they paid their debt to society, and they're going to end up, getting it removed. He paid his debt to society. Yeah. That's the end of it.
Do we like any presidential pardons?
I could think of a couple. Jeanine, I'm sure, could think of a couple.
Sure.
Judge Jeanine, Richard's saying a lot of things that I'm not sure are completely accurate. Would you like to jump in?
Okay, I want to start here. Donald Trump has pardoned tax evaders. That's what you just said.
And weapons and firearm charges.
Okay, hold on. Here's the bottom line. There are pardons and there are pardons. Now, there are pardons that occur after someone has served jail time, has paid his debt to society, is remorseful.
So again, she keeps saying paid their debt to society, having served time and paid their debt to society, repeated that a few times. And she gets very defensive when Richard Fowler brings up pardons for tax evasion, which is odd because Charles Kushner, part of his pardon was for tax evasion. And of course, there's going to be other people for tax evasion later on. It's not that uncommon to get a presidential pardon for tax evasion. But she personally just gets really worked up and she's like, "You just said," and she's very angry. Here's why. In the last hours of his presidency, Donald J. Trump issued one last presidential pardon to Albert Pirro, Judge Jeanine Pirro's ex-husband. In 2000, Albert Pirro, a longtime New York businessman and real estate developer, was convicted by a jury of his peers of conspiracy and tax evasion. Jeanine Pirro was then the district attorney of Westchester County. So that's a big deal when you're the DA of an entire county and your husband gets busted for tax evasion. Prosecutors argued that Albert Pirro and his brother Anthony Pirro, who acted as his accountant, deducted $1.2 million of Albert Pirro's personal expenses as business write-offs, reducing his taxes by $413,000. The jury heard how the Pirros paid for personal items out of the accounts for more than a dozen of Albert Pirro's companies. The jury also learned about the Pirros' veritable fleet of luxury cars, including a Mercedes-Benz for Mrs. Pirro's mother, who lived in Elmira, New York, which was deducted as an expense of Yonkers real estate company owned by Albert Pirro. Elmira is 235 miles west of Yonkers, a nearly 4-hour drive. So that's actually completely crazy. So like Hunter Biden, Albert Pirro also paid the government over $1 million in back taxes before the trial. But that didn't seem to help him. The trial and subsequent conviction damaged both Jeanine and Albert Pirro's political ambitions. They were both rising stars in the Republican Party at the time. Now, her husband hadn't held public office, but there were, buzz that he might, partly because of her political career, and that just put a damper on both of them because nobody wanted to be associated with this crime of tax evasion. Now, I made a quick list of some of the worst pardons, most controversial pardons of Donald J. Trump's presidency. There were a lot of them, so I only did a handful. And if you have some that you also think are very important, I get it. And my apologies now if you don't hear them, but it's just for space and time. I can't go through all, I think it was 143. It's a lot. So here we go. We're going to start with Paul Manafort. He was the former Trump campaign chairman. He lied repeatedly to special counsel Robert Mueller about connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. He was found guilty of tax and bank fraud. He was sentenced to a 47-month sentence in federal prison, ordered to pay $24.8 million in restitution and a $50,000 fine. He served some of his sentence under home confinement due to COVID-19. He had some FARA problems where he was acting as a foreign agent for a government. That's a whole other thing. So Roger Stone is next. He was a political advisor to Donald J. Trump. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison for obstructing the investigation into the Trump campaign's ties to Russia. I'm sensing a theme here. He was convicted of witness tampering and 5 counts of making false statements to Congress. Never served a day of his sentence because it was commuted immediately by Donald J. Trump. Next up, we're moving on to Michael Flynn, former White House National Security Advisor. He pleaded guilty to lying to investigators about his contacts with Russia's ambassador during the 2016-2017 presidential transition. The judge in his trial said that Flynn sold your country out and asked prosecutors if they considered treason charges. Flynn managed to delay his sentencing for years and was ultimately pardoned by Donald J. Trump. One of his lawyers was Sidney Powell, who later destroyed her career after she promoted Trump's lies about the 2020 election. And that's a whole other story. Don't have time for it. Then we're moving on to Steve Bannon, a former Trump campaign CEO and White House advisor, never convicted of a crime, but allegedly defrauded donors over a phony scheme to privately fund a wall at the U.S. southern border. He's also a white nationalist. I'll say this with no hesitation. He promoted some very disgusting groups in Eastern Europe that were very, like white nationalists. Very deep, dark, disgusting human being. I will say this about Steve Bannon, just absolute slime. Even Trump got sick of him, but now he's back like a bad virus. And the last one that I'm going to mention, at least today in this podcast, is the Blackwater 4. These were U.S. military veterans convicted in connection with the massacre of at least 14 civilians, including 2 children, in an unprovoked attack in Iraq in 2007. Iraqi officials ruled 17 civilians were killed. So there's some debate if it's 14 or 17, and I found an equal amount of sources that cited 2 different numbers. So that's why both of them are in my bulleted list here. So at the time of the massacre, the men were working for Blackwater, a private security contractor. None of the victims were armed. Many of them were attempting to flee the area when they were shot or killed by a grenade thrown by the contractors. One contractor, Nicholas Slatton, received a life sentence because he was the first one to start firing. Pete Hegseth, Trump's current pick for the next Secretary of Defense, advocated for this pardon. Hegseth also promoted a wildly different narrative about the contractors' actions on the day of the massacre than what was presented in court. Trump's decision to pardon the men was criticized by the Iraqi Foreign Ministry, UN Human Rights Office, and Human Rights Watch. There was also a member of the FBI who criticized this as well. A lot of people criticized this, but it was just bad because apparently, like, people were shot with their hands up, people were running away, shot in the back. It was just bad, and none of them had weapons. Also want to add that the age of the 2 children who were killed during the massacre were 9 and 11. One was just sitting in a car, one was walking with a parent. Just absolutely tragic. So now I should give a shout out to my sponsor since I'm about halfway through the podcast. We're about to shift to a new topic. And you're probably wondering, like, why haven't you heard an advertisement for some expensive skincare or men's jeans or I don't know, software for team building at your corporate job? That's because I don't have any fancy advertisers because I'm not big enough yet. But I am supported 100%, and I mean 100%, by the listeners of this podcast and readers of my newsletter. That's how can you become a paid subscriber, paid supporter to Decoding Fox News? You can go to my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News or my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. And all paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. And last week I was hoping to get 2 things out, but they're definitely coming out this week. Might even get 3. I'm just gunning before the end of the year for the holiday to try to get as much in as I possibly can. Next week, just want to give you guys a heads up now, is going to be the last podcast of the year that's going to be current about a week. I'm probably going to have an extra bonus podcast on the 23rd. That's the day before Christmas Eve. That's hopefully going to be an interview. I'm still working on that. So that's about it. But anyway, if you can't afford to become a paid subscriber or paid supporter, I totally understand. It's $5 a month, $55 for the year, or $168 for founding members, which are just amazing. And I owe you so much gratitude. You have no idea. That's one way you can do it. But if not, if you can't afford that, I totally understand. Share the podcast, share the newsletter on social media, share it with your friends, give me a good review. Also incredibly helpful. It helps me in ways you could not possibly understand because that's how I get new followers. So that's about it. Back to the actual podcast. Here we go. Fox News is already giving Trump credit for Biden's economy. Now, this is my favorite kind of clip. I got so excited when I found this because it's short, and I found almost an identical clip on PBS, and I'm like, let's stick these together. So the first one, this is from the same day. This is from Friday, December 6th. We go with Steve Doocy finally acting excited about a jobs report. We've had plenty of good jobs reports under the Biden administration, but Fox just seems to ignore them or downplay them. But now they're all excited. So here we go, starting with Steve Doocy.
Got a Fox Business Alert. You're going to want to hear this. The November jobs report just released showing the United States added, look at that, 227,000 jobs. That's about 27,000 higher than economists expected. The encouraging jobs data coming after, of course, Donald Trump's victory. The unemployment rate is now slightly higher, however, at 4.2%, in line with expectations.
Now, this next clip is from a legitimate news source, the PBS NewsHour. The voice you're going to hear is Jeff Bennett. And let's just compare how he presents the exact same data.
U.S. job market bounced back in November from a major slowdown the month before. The economy added 227,000 jobs. That's far more than October's revised total of only 36,000, and that's when 2 hurricanes and worker strikes held job creation down. Just 3 job categories, that's healthcare, hospitality, and government, accounted for 70% of November's growth, and the unemployment rate rose, but only slightly, from 4.1 to 4.2%.
Now notice how the specificity in Jeff Bennett's reading of the exact same information is what makes it more accurate. And by specificity, I mean, I've actually, when I was in grad school, I was a business concentration, and we looked at jobs reports. We got the actual jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And right there at the top, it'll say exactly where the job growth came from. It doesn't just say this is how many jobs the economy created. It will say these are the sectors in which the jobs came from. And the fact that it's hospitality, healthcare, and government, and then you're trying to say that Trump being elected, who's, again, not the president, caused this surge of jobs in government? Really? How would that be possible? Second, hospitality, how would that have happened? And then healthcare. That just doesn't make any sense. That Trump would not have had an effect yet. Plus, you're just, that's not possible. You don't just win an election and people are like, I'm hiring now. That's just not how it works. It would take longer to see an effect there. So that's just absolute nonsense. And again, when he said those specifics of healthcare, hospitality, and government is really when it just destroyed any hint that Trump had any sort of say in that, because Trump wants to get rid of government jobs. So that just makes no sense. So next up, we have Judge Jeanine also implying that Trump somehow is making things happen when he's not yet actually president. And this is from Tuesday on The 5.
Harley, talk about the art of the deal. At this level, I mean, the world leaders are all falling into place, and this is a president who doesn't believe in compromise. I mean, he's acting on this America first, basically saying to Trudeau in Canada, you know, your economy can't survive unless you rip us off to $100 billion. Too bad.
Yeah. And the funniest part of it is that Trudeau thought that his best argument against Trump was that, but that will crater our economy.
Yeah.
And Trump is looking at him and he's going, yeah, exactly. That's my point. And then offers I think it was kind of a a peace offering by saying, look, we'll just make you a state and everything will be great.
Okay, this is all ridiculous. So the president-elect cannot broker any trade deals until he's sworn in. He had a meeting with Trudeau, but nothing was finalized or agreed upon. According to sources at the meeting, Trump was also joking about annexing Canada as the 51st state. Canada is a sovereign nation, and there's no major push by leaders or citizens in either nation to unite as one larger country. So there's no, like, let's make Canada America kind of coalition in Canada. And there's certainly no part of Americans that are like, hey, we want to make Canada part of America. It just doesn't exist. This is complete nonsense. It's totally stupid. He's talking like a child. Also, the U.S. has a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, which was agreed upon during Trump's last term on July 1st, 2020. Trump boasted that it was an improvement on NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. By negating it, Trump is trashing his own trade deal. So it's not like the USMCA is something from Obama or Bill Clinton, or, you know, this is a brand new trade agreement that he came up with, or at least his people did, and that he got Mexico and Canada to agree to. And now he's like saying, you're ripping us off. Like, what is going on? And they can retaliate immediately if we did that. So this is all kind of ridiculous. And finally, we're going to move on to Emily Compagno, also saying the same ridiculousness on Wednesday on Fox and Friends. And she's talking about strong Cyber Monday sales. So here we go.
Yes. And the irony, by the way, is that reflected consumer optimism in the future. It was the fact that President Donald Trump is the president-elect. It's the fact that they have now a refreshing administration wipe to look forward to. Right. That's in part what fosters consumers' excitement and spending on Cyber Monday. It wasn't the dread everyone's been feeling for the last 4 years.
So again, President Biden is still very much the president of the United States. This would still be considered his economy. And if people were struggling before the election, they're still struggling, most likely. Most likely they are still struggling. It's only been a month. I'm not sure how that would magically, hey, I'm just going to break all my credit cards and go into debt because Cyber Monday and Trump's president. If people are doing that, okay, I wouldn't advise it. I also think it's going to be interesting, and I will just say although that's a big if, because I don't know, the economy starts to show signs of weakness or going south or inflation goes up, how they're going to twist it around to blame Joe Biden. Because now they're taking credit for Joe Biden's economy. And 6 months from now, are they going to try to blame Joe Biden for inflation? If Trump, starts slapping tariffs on everything, I don't know. I don't know. So next up, we're going to move on to more jokes about annexing Canada, which is absolutely absurd. I just found the tone of this to be really, really awful. So this is from Wednesday from Fox and Friends, and the next one after this is Jesse Waters, same night from Jesse Waters Primetime. Here you go.
All right, President-elect Trump reportedly told Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that if Canada's economy can't survive without ripping off the United States, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state. In response to Trudeau saying he can't levy the tariff because it would kill the Canadian economy, Trump replied, asking, quote, so your country can't survive unless it's ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion? Trump then suggested that Canada could maybe become the 51st state, which reportedly caused the prime minister to laugh nervously.
Canada, a 51st and 52nd state. Will we double the size of the United States, gobble up their oil, timber, and tech, and bring home every medal at the Winter Olympics? They do have the best skaters and skiers in the world. And while Trump's at it, he should buy Greenland, too. Don't make it a state, though. We don't need more stars. Make it like northern Puerto Rico.
Okay, just to break down the logic of the stupidity here. Trump says he hates NAFTA, comes up with a new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. It largely stays unchanged during the Biden administration. Trump comes back, goes to Canada and says, ha, you're ripping us off to the tune of $100 million. Well, who? Why? Why would that have happened, Trump? I don't know. Maybe because your stupid trade agreement that you thought was so much better than NAFTA. And it might be. I don't know. I'm not an expert in international trade, especially with Canada. But some of the updates which I read seemed reasonable. But the fact that you're now blaming Canada for ripping us off on a trade deal you brokered, your people brokered. Next, Greenland, not for sale. It's part of Denmark. It's a territory basically of Denmark. Hardly anybody lives there. They don't want to be part of the United States. They're not selling the largest island in the world, most of which is uninhabitable. You can't live there. I'm tired, so I can't talk right now. But you can't. There's like a small patch of Greenland where people live, and they don't want to have anything to do with becoming part of the United States. So you can't buy it. It's not funny. None of this is funny. So let's just go to this hypothetical insanity of annexing Canada, a country that does not want to be part of the United States. Well, that would involve our military. And then what? We're going to kill Canadians to force them to become Americans? I bet if we were that stupid, the UK would get involved because Canada is still kind of connected to the Commonwealth. And then what? We're going to have war with the UK over Canada, a country with 1/10 of our population, roughly, that has a lot of land and timber and all that. But they don't want to be, they do have oil. They don't want to be part of our country. And they want to we get along with them. We get along great with them. We have very little, tension or problems with Canada. Why on earth would we do that? Other than we have a president who thinks like an 8-year-old boy. He really does. His brain is stunted like an idiot, like a moron. He looks in the mirror and just comes up with bad ideas and nobody stops him. He's a crazy person. And I'm sorry, but you're probably going to hear a lot of this out of my mouth for the next 4 years because that's what I think of this person. And I'm not going to be like, oh, well, that's a reasonable. No. I openly admit I think he's an idiot. I openly admit I think he's a criminal. I've said that the entire time I've worked on Decoding Fox News, and I will shut up now because I'm turning into Judge Jeanine. I'm going to start throwing a pen. So according to reporting by the BBC, just this about Denmark, the foreign affairs spokesman for the populist Danish People's Party, Søren Espersen, told national broadcaster DR, If he, Trump, is truly contemplating this, then this is final proof that he has gone mad. And that was in 2019, but I don't think anything has changed. And tip of the hat, my friend, tip of the hat. See, other people call him crazy. I'm calling him crazy. Here we go. Next up, this is from Wednesday, Jesse Watters Primetime. I don't even know how to explain this clip. I really don't. This was part of an extended monologue about the Hunter Biden pardon. If you can make sense of this, I would, if I had some sort of sweepstakes for listeners of Decoding Fox News and I could give you a prize, I don't have a sweepstakes like that. But if I did, I would, tip of the hat if you can understand what the heck he's talking about
The
here.
last time they said Russia rigged the election, but it was really the FBI. How do we really know it was Iran? How do we know it wasn't China? How do we know it wasn't our own government blaming it on Iran? Obama's CIA hacked the Senate, and his Justice Department hacked reporters.
I could play that 10 times, and I still don't know what he's talking about. Iran? Or did Iran rig the election? Did the FBI rig the election? Did the FBI get together with Iran to rig the election? Because that's, I don't know, highly unlikely. Don't think our FBI is like, hey, Iran, let's hang out and rig an election for Joe Biden. Now, this next one is not in the newsletter because I couldn't fit it. This is another just bizarro rant about Obama. And I just have to say this. If you're talking about Obama in 2024, you've got nothing. Because you might want to look at a calendar and see the last time he was our president. Just saying, sit yourself down, have a nice cup of coffee, and say, I'm going to look up when Barack Obama was our last president. It'd be kind of like if I'm talking about George W. Bush, wouldn't it? I don't like George W. Bush, not a fan. But why would I be talking about him unless I'm talking about, WMDs in Iraq? Perhaps. But other than that, doesn't really make any sense. So here we go.
But I have to talk about Barack Obama. Hussein, sorry. He is saying that someone else has been polarizing. He was the most polarizing president almost in decades. Racially polarizing. If you look at the charts in Gallup, blacks and whites started hating each other. Blacks started hating the country. It just became horrible. Class starts with the bitter clingers, and then at the end, Occupy Wall Street. He starts pitting rich people against poor people and back and forth, 1%ers, all that stuff. We all started hating each other. And then he talks about weaponization, all this stuff. It was his Justice Department that spied on a Fox News reporter. It was his CIA that spied on the Senate. It was his administration that spied on Trump, that entrapped Flynn, that weaponized the federal government. So now all of a sudden, when everyone's mad that he got caught and did this, now they want to just throw a blanket pardon over everybody in D.C. That's not how it's done.
I would love to sit him down, or no, I'd like to crack up in his brain and see the flow chart of what he was talking about. So you're starting with the premise of that rant was about Obama, but not really, because he was really ultimately talking about blanket pardons that Joe Biden gave to his son, Hunter Biden. That came at the very end, but instead we're talking about Barack Obama, and somehow Barack Obama caused racism and racial animus in the United States, because before that everything was great. We had no problems whatsoever. It was all Obama. So I guess what happened in 2020 with George Floyd, that was somehow Barack Obama as well. Because why not? Just go there. Work with me, Jesse Watters here. Not really understanding that. Some of what he said about there's a little bit of truth in there mixed with a bunch of nonsense, especially about Flynn. And then we go back to somehow it's about Hunter Biden's pardon. Wow. Is there like a little wheel in your head that's just empty, that just spins in the wind? There's not even a mouse. It's just an empty thing spinning. And you just say, mom a lot. Because he brought up his mother like 3 times this week. I can't handle it. It's painful. And what is up with this conservative men who have just profound misogyny, like Jesse Watters and Pete Hegseth, who have weird relationships with their mothers? It's strange. I don't get it. Very quickly, before we move on to the next, because I haven't done it in a minute, and it's still early. It's like 7:30 p.m. So my neighbors might be like, why is she screaming again in her apartment? They might hear this. I think they hear this, because this is always loud. You know who I'm going to do. I'm Judge Jeanine, and yes, my ex-husband got a pardon. But how dare you bring it up on the 5? How dare you bring it up at Fox at all? Maybe I got some jewelry out of it, and a nice car, and my mother had a Mercedes-Benz that she didn't have to pay for, and that she could drive around, even though she was 4 hours away from the business that it supposedly was attached to. Who cares? Why do you care? It's our business what we spend our money on, not yours. And he did nothing wrong. And he paid his time. And I might have been a senator had it not been for that. A senator, goddamn. That's why I divorced him. I'm throwing my pen. That's it. Odin got on my desk. Odin is on my desk. You probably heard it on the microphone. That's it. Throwing a pen. I did. I actually threw a pen. Now, Odin has moved from my desk to my lap. He's a large black cat with a very unusually long tail. He's like a long, skinny Egyptian kind of angular head, big, huge ears. People think he's a Bombay. No, he's just a street cat from Brooklyn. Anyway, he's very needy, very emotional, and he tends to do this at the end of the podcast because he's like, shut up and pet me. It's kind of what he's doing right now. So stories Fox News ignored. Every week I compare the stories I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. We're going to start off with updates in the Israel-Hamas war. A nighttime Israeli airstrike killed at least 21 people in a tent camp for displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza, according to the head of a hospital in the area. The area was designated a humanitarian safe zone, but has been targeted multiple times. The Israeli military said it struck senior Hamas militants involved in terrorist activities in the area, but did not provide more specific. Updates in the war in Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken attended his last NATO foreign ministers meeting. Blinken discussed what the U.S. State Department said were concrete steps the West could take to help Ukraine defend itself. The head of NATO also encouraged member countries to increase their defense funding to hit the target goal of 2% of GDP. Protests continued in Georgia as more than 200 were arrested and dozens injured after the country's ruling party said it would suspend talks to join the European Union. Tens of thousands of protesters filled the streets of the capital as police used tear gas and water cannons to try to quell the crowds. Also in Georgia, Nika Gaminia, 48, a leader from one of 4 opposition groups, was carried by his arms and legs by police from his party headquarters in a side street next to Parliament in the capital. Other opposition members were also ambushed by police as they met in a hotel to plan a general strike. Carlos Trevias, the CEO of Stellantis, stepped down on Sunday. The company announced it was searching for a new CEO and plans to complete its search by mid-year 2025. Pat Gilsner, the CEO of Intel, announced his retirement last week. His departure is another sign of turmoil at the struggling company. Intel was once a dominant force in the semiconductor industry, but has since been eclipsed by rival NVIDIA. Cuba experienced another blackout after the electrical grid collapsed last week. Millions were left without power. The latest outage comes after a series of blackouts caused by failing infrastructure, natural disasters, and economic turmoil. In France, the parliament ousted Michel Barnier, the French prime minister, after a no-confidence vote. The no-confidence vote was promoted by lawmakers on both the far left and far right. Following a comprehensive investigation, the Justice Department announced that the MPD, or Memphis Police Department, uses excessive force, conducts unlawful stops, searches and arrests, unlawfully discriminates against Black people when enforcing the law, and unlawfully discriminates in their response to people with behavioral health disabilities. The U.S. Department of Agriculture will begin testing raw milk from across the nation to better track the H5N1 bird flu that has been spreading in cattle since March. Only a tiny fraction of milk sold in the U.S. is raw and unpasteurized. The UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, warned that Iran is poised to significantly increase the production rate of highly enriched uranium. Romania's constitutional court threw out the results of the election's first round and delayed the second round. The sitting government says that there was a vast influence effort by foreign actor on the social media app TikTok to boost the candidacy of a candidate dubbed as pro-Russian, anti-NATO, and anti-Semitic. And I made this joke on Twitter about the fact that Romania is basically throwing out an election due to foreign interference, and that Brazil actually pursued some type of criminal indictment. I'm not sure what's happening with that right now, against a president who tried to overthrow the government in a failed coup. So yeah, it can be done. You see how that works? It can be done, the United States. See how that works? Instead of, I don't know, taking months to do anything and then doing nothing. Yay, our system is very slow. Anyway, and inefficient and doesn't work. Anyway, I'm just saying, just saying. I don't want to go down the Merrick Garland crazy fest. But anyway, next up, we have By the Numbers. Every week I compare the top 5 topics on Fox News to the top 5 topics on PBS. Let's start with Fox. Here we go. Hunter Biden pardon, 22%. Trump cabinet picks, I just put them all in one category because there's so many of them, is 10%. 7% border crisis. 6% was the Patriot Awards, which is special they have every year, and they keep bragging. Now it's the second most popular award show in the country, second only to the Oscars. Who cares? And then 4% was the United Healthcare CEO assassination. Moving on to PBS NewsHour, 17% was Trump cabinet picks, 9% state of the U.S. economy, 9% Hunter Biden pardon, 9% Syrian civil war, which is a major story, and 8% artist profile, which is a regular segment on PBS. Now moving on to words used on Fox for the week ending December 8th, 2024. Biden topped the list at 472. That's shocking. Trump, 416. Pardon, 372. Hunter, 188. Justice, 99. Border, 90. Crime, 69. Kamala dropping all the way down to 46. Tariff, 43. Canada, 43. Mexico, 32. Israel, 15. United Healthcare, 14. China, 10. And AOC, as she always is 3. Kind of amazing. That's the podcast for the week. I'm exhausted. Going to be starting work on the Pete Hegseth bonus podcast in a moment, and the newsletter for that. I have so much clips, so much. I read one of his books. There's a lot to uncover there. So if you would like to see more of my work, you can go to Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's a Facebook fan page. I don't post as much on TikTok because they take my stuff down. They do. They take it down. They don't understand what I do. They're like, this is disinformation. I'm like, oh, here we go. And they don't like it when I put 2 clips together. They call that bad. I hate TikTok. Anyway, I do. I openly say it. I don't like TikTok. I don't get it. I think I'm also twice the age of your average TikTok user. Anyway, if you'd like to become a paid subscriber for Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon for Decoding Fox News, or share the newsletter, share the podcast. My mascots, Odin and Thor, they're both cats. Send their love. They always appreciate you. And if you'd like to see a version of this podcast on YouTube, you can go to the Resolute Square YouTube channel. And that's about it. I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.